Come on in. My name is Rick Butz. Welcome to wood carving. Today, I'd like to show you how to do a fairly advanced relief carving. This particular project is from a design called the fleur-de-lis, which was a very popular architectural motif for many centuries. And what I'm doing here is I've just started outlining this carving, which is the first step in relief carving. You want to take a V-gouge and cut around the edges. Now, one of the things you want to watch on a carving with this many curves in it is keep an eye on the grain. In this particular one, I've drawn this project out so the grain is going vertically to the design, which means that when I'm coming around these curves here, I'm going to have to come in this direction or in this direction. If I reverse that, then I'm going to start raising splinters that will run into the design. Now this is a softwood, this is pine, so I can carve most of this just by hand. The fleur-de-lis was a very popular motif, and it's considered, well, it's pretty much associated with France because it was part of the French royal arms for many centuries. The history of it is kind of interesting. Apparently it first appeared on the royal arms sometime in the 5th century, when, according to legend, King Clovis was being baptized. He's a Frankish king, and as legend goes, a lily, which was a symbol of purity, descended from heaven during his baptism. And that was considered pretty impressive back in the 5th century, especially if you were a king. It was a good way to get people's attention. And since then, it's always been part of the French coat of arms. Now, one of the things that's interesting about this design is it was used for many years as an architectural design. That means that they used it on buildings and interiors for paneling and all sorts of things. It's got a very interesting shape to it. It's got lots of nice curves. And the other thing that architects liked was it would show shadows from a number of different lighting conditions. So regardless of where you had placed it next to a window inside your manor house or building, it always looked good. And that was a great thing to have. Anyway, you just keep working around here, outlining this. And this outlining will separate the raised portion of your design from the background. And then, when you get it outlined, you can begin setting in, which is the beginning part of clearing away the background. Now, to set in, what you do is you take a tool whose curve or sweep matches the shape of your design. And then you take a mallet and just drive that down straight, and that gives you a nice vertical edge for your design. In this case, I'm using a number 7. This is about 35 millimeter number 7. And I'm going to take a mallet and drive that down. Because this is a symmetrical design, you know that whatever tool you use on one side, you can use the same tool on the other side of the design. So I can come over here, and I can put that in here. And I can come around here and strike down, just as I did on the other one. And just keep walking that around. So I'm just sliding that around in its own circle. And same thing over here. And on these inside parts, I can strike down vertically like this. Now, the reason that you outline first before you start setting in is you clear away this wood along the edge of it, and that lessens the pressure on the tool as it's being driven into the wood. Because otherwise, if you just were to take a piece of wood and start striking down with these stop cuts, if it's a hardwood, there's a good chance that you could actually chip the cutting edge. This particular piece of wood I'm using right now is a piece of pine. It's a nice, it's a soft wood to carve, and for practicing something like this, it's a great wood because it's not very hard to carve, but yet you're not allowed very many mistakes in it. If you start going against the grain, this wood will tell you real fast because it splits. So it's a good wood to train with. I'm just going to tap that lightly. I'm going to take a number 5 and come back around to the top here. Then when I come around this side, I can flip the tool around and make the curve work for me. Same thing along here. We can come around with this number 5. And let's see. I need something a little more of a sweep. Remember, the larger the sweep number, the more that tool is curved around. This is a number 8. This is a fun project because you get to use all your different tools on it. And number 5 to come around this curve. Now I know you're probably looking at this thinking, boy, that looks like a lot of work. Well, it was. And this is a sort of project that was a stock and trade for a professional carver back, many centuries ago. And if you were a professional wood carver in the 1700s, this is the type of project that you'd be doing for your bread and butter. So, you can tell just by playing around with a design like this that the only people who could afford to have this type of work done were generally members of nobility or wealthy patrons. I'm just going to come along here and make a cut down the edge to widen that out a bit. And this is the beginning of carving the background. I'm going to take a minute and set this one in here. This curve. That's the nice thing about a lot of these old designs, is the curves all kind of follow the same number of tools. So you could use just a few tools in doing something like this. Now this sort of motif was used quite a bit for a number of different projects. For example, you could use it in furniture. All you'd have to do is take a panel like this, make it a little bit wider, and then bevel down the edge of that panel, and you could fit it into a frame of, well, say, a headboard or a chest of drawers, or you could fit into a frame inside inside paneling of a room, and you could panel a whole room with little carved panels like this. And it was done, and they were quite beautiful too. Now I'm just going to scoop away this background around here. Now I'm using a number 5 for roughing out the background here. And the number 5 takes out a fairly deep bite in the wood. And then I'll come along with a smaller sweep like a number 3 or something and smooth that down later. You know, the way this wood is splittering along here, it almost looks like I might have gotten a piece of white fur by mistake. It is one of the nightmares of a wood carver. White fir is a piece of wood that looks almost identical to white pine. And a lot of times you'll go and buy a piece of board. And of course, the people who sell it to you don't know because the woods look very much alike. And you go to start carving it, and no matter which way you carve, it splinters and it splits, and it's just a wretched piece of wood. but I don't think this is fir. It might be a relative. The only way I can tell is generally by the smell. White fir smells a little more pungent than the pine, which has this nice sweet fragrance. But that's what's fascinating about carving. Every piece of wood has its own characteristic. And the other thing that's interesting too is when you start carving in a piece of wood, you have no idea what that wood is going to be like. And you don't know until you start putting your tools to it. And then you can tell it's either good or it's going to be bad or whatever. We're doing the inside here. I'm going to use a nice little small fishtail. One of the things I enjoy about a project like this is there's a chance to work with all your different tools. And to me that's a lot of fun because tools take on, well, a very personalized feeling. Someone can let me use a tool identical to the one that I have, and yet I can tell just by feel that it's not my tool. It's kind of like a pair of shoes or a faithful old sweater or something like that. It just kind of gets broken into you. And the tools are like that. After a decade or so, they really sort of take on a distinctive feeling. They become an extension of your hand. And you can tell when you're using somebody else's tool. It just doesn't feel the same. Probably a lot of you know what I mean. It's something that shows up in other types of handwork. But the tools just become an extension of your hand, and it makes all the difference in the world whether that feels comfortable or not. Now, if we're doing the final smoothing cuts inside these places where it's kind of hard to reach, you might find a spoon gouge very helpful. And this is a gouge that comes around and it's shaped like a little bit of a spoon at the end. Now, one of the things is, in looking at that tool, you'd think the natural motion would be for a scooping motion. Well, you can use that too for a very deep hollow. But also, because it has a very limited clearance down here, you can take and you can work that tool along at an angle like this. So you can have a very narrow spot, and then you can still take this tool and clean it out. And that's where it's handy for that. Now, another spoon gouge that's real handy to use is one for getting into tight corners. And this is a spoon chisel. See, it's got that spoon shape to it. But this one is flat. And it's got a skew chisel at the end. And one is sharpened on the left side, and one is sharpened on the right side. And what you can do with this is these places where you have these tight corners, you can come in there and you can clean those out with that. Because that's much too tight to get in with something like a fishtail. These are just the sort of tools that were stock and trade for a carver centuries ago. Well, even right up until the 1920s in Europe. Now that we've got the background smoothed down, then we can start carving the raised portion of the design. And this is kind of the dessert of the carving. This is what's fun. And I'm going to start again by outlining the inside portions with a V tool. And here's what I'm looking for. Got a nice sharp angle to it. I'm going to come in and begin outlining these curves. This is such a neat design. And there's so much you can do with it. It always kind of amazes me how some of these architectural designs became so standardized. Like this is an example of a lily. But yet, it probably doesn't look much like any lily that you've seen. And there was a number of carvings like this. There was the Oh, the Gothic grape leaves and the acanthus leaf. Now, I'm not sure most people even know what an acanthus is. I'm not sure I know what an acanthus is. It goes by some different names in different parts of Europe. But starting back with the ancient Greeks, they began doing stylized leaves. And it just kept getting more and more stylized until, after a while, it didn't look like a leaf. It didn't look like a particular plant at all. And they're beautiful in their own right. As a matter of fact, that was one of the criticisms for the Gothic revival in architecture. During the 19th century, late 19th century, people started taking a very strong interest again in the old Gothic architecture. And one of the criticisms that was leveled against that particular architectural style, and of course it carried over with carving as well, was that even though they were using the same designs, the Gothic version of the grape leaves and oak leaves and so forth, they were building their designs on styles of, they're copying the Gothic style instead of coming up with their own designs. And for that reason, a lot of people criticize that as being somewhat stilted. Now, when I've got this outline here, I can start roughing this out. And to do that, I'm just going to take a number 7 gouge and rough this shape down. I'm not being real neat about that. I'm just working down the contour here. Okay, I'm going to have to swing that around and get that on the other side because I'm starting to hit against the grain. I'm just roughing that shape down there. Now see that grain is starting to split up there? That means you have to come around and work it down from this direction. You have to be sensitive to your wood. You'll hear it start to crack, or you can feel it in your hands when it starts going the wrong way to the grain. And after a while, you'll just instinctively know these things. Come around this curve. And just bringing that down. Now for the outside curve, I can use a little wider gouge, and I think I'll use a number 6 looks like a nice one. That's a little bit flatter. Not too much there, I'm just going to take it down a little bit. For the convex curves, you want a larger sweep number, like a 7 or an 8. For the outside, anywhere from a 6 to a 5 will be okay. Now the reason for that is because you have a tighter curve you're dealing with on the inside here. And for example, now this one here is number 6. I can't get in there with that tool. It just doesn't have enough curve to match the curve of the design. So I'll go back to this one's a number 8. And that'll do. It's got a nice curve to get down there. Now, one of the techniques that I wanted to show you with this project today is a fairly advanced relief carving technique, but yet you can use it on a number of different projects. Let me just finish coming around here, and I'll show you what I mean. So in a carving like this, you don't want to use any sandpaper. These old carvers wouldn't. They would make all the smooth cuts just by hand. And to do that, they'd use a technique called a sweep cut. Let me show you how you do that. For the outside curves, let's see, I'm going to use a wide number 3. Here we go. Now to do that technique, what you do is you'd hold the tool as you would normally, but you brace the palm of your hand on the carving. And by holding your hand there, you can take and draw that tool around in a nice, even, steady curve. And it gives you a nice finishing cut. By varying how far you hold that tool away from your palm and where you pivot on your palm, you can make any number of circles. Look at this. You can make a wide sweeping circle. You can bring it close, make a close, tight sweep. And you should be able to do that from either hand, too. And this will give you a real nice, smooth, clean cut. This is just one of those tricks that these people knew. For doing the inside curves, let's use a spoon gouge. And I'm going to use one that's got a little more curve than the small one I had. This is a number 5. Let's see if that will just about do it. I can come around like this. Now see, I need a spoon gouge. I need that curve on these tight inside curves so that I can get the curve to come around there. A straight tool is going to dig into the edges. So instead, just bring that around. Look at that. So you don't need sandpaper. Just bring that right up to that knob there. Same thing here. Just switch from the other hand. These tools are so versatile. There's so many different things you can do with the tools once you learn their potential. Look at that. We can come around here from the other side. Look, I can even swing that around. Oops, that's going against the grain there. Better switch hands here. I can come around there. Come around here with this one. I'm even working on the outside curve on that. To do that one there, we'll probably have to turn that around a bit. There, much better. See, the grain changes on this. So you have to be sensitive to that. It comes around here this way, and then when you get there, you've got to reverse directions and meet that cut. Very gently, and you can just pare that right down. While I'm at it, let me catch the outside of that one. So again, I'll use the number 3. Just bring that around. And when I get down to the sharp part there, take my spoon gouge once again, and well, I have to swing that around, but get that around from the other side. And that's really all there is to it. For detailing this portion, we don't have too many curves, so what we can do is take and rough that out with our V-gouge. This comes around like so. See, that's what I mean is fun about this. There's so many different shapes you have to play with. Besides, I always find it very interesting to be able to work with a carving of a style that is centuries old, and to be able to do the type of work that these old carvers did. It really gives you a feeling of touching history. I have to come around from the other side and trim that. Just trim that down with a few gouges. Once again, for the outside, just take your tool and in the sweep cut, go around and bevel that down. I think you get the picture of it now. I think you get the hang of how we do that. And that's really all there is to it. And when you get done, you're going to have a carving that's going to have these shapes in it. And it's going to be a kind of a nice carving you can put in a piece of furniture or just hang on a wall. If you're using it for a piece of furniture or for a particular type of decoration, you would stain it or finish it to match whatever you're using it with. For this wall decoration, I just took some paste wax, like what you'd use on a piece of furniture or on a floor, rubbed it on there, buffed it off, and there we had it. A fun, classical old design. Try it sometime. I think you'll really enjoy it. Next week, I'd like to go back and do some wildlife and show you how to make this river otter. A very playful animal up in the Adirondacks and one of my favorites. So thanks for dropping by, and until next time, this is Rick Butz wishing you happy carving.
How to Carve Wood, a book of projects and techniques by Rick Butz, is available by calling 1-800-950-WMHT. With more than 200 pages and over 400 photographs and illustrations, including patterns for some of the projects in the series, this companion guide presents important woodworking techniques. For your copy, call 1-800-950-WMHT. The cost is $17.95 plus handling. Please have your credit card ready when you call.